I felt the vibration in my pocket before I registered the metallic tang of my coffee, sudden and sharp against my tongue. The neon open sign buzzed behind the counter, and the low hum of traffic on Canal Street thrummed through the cafe's thin walls. I set my mug down, steam curling into the fluorescent glare overhead, and flipped my phone open. A message from an unknown number appeared: "You deserve the truth." Beneath it, an image began to load. My heart caught as I recognized the pressed flower bookmark I'd slipped into her travel journal before she left. In the photograph, she stood on a wrought iron balcony in New Orleans, laughter in her eyes, leaning so close to a stranger I could see the small rip at the cuff of his dark denim jacket. She held the bookmark between her fingers, petals brittle and brown. My pulse thundered. I tasted copper on my tongue again, reached for a napkin as if it might steady me. Around me, cups clinked and the barista called out orders, but those familiar sounds felt distant, fractured by shock. She'd told me she was staying at her mother's in Baton Rouge all week. I remembered picturing her on a porch sipping iced tea, not swaying to jazz drifting up from Bourbon Street. My chest tightened. I pressed my palm against the cool Formica tabletop, grit biting into my skin as I fought to steady my breathing. I zoomed in on the stranger's jacket, navy denim, worn thread at the elbow, and memorized every detail: the grain of the wood floor behind him, the wrought iron fleur-de-lis shadows coating her cheek. A tram's bell jangling outside shook the glass. I blinked twice, forcing my pulse back into a rhythm. Stay calm. Catalog every detail, I told myself. I tapped the photo to see the timestamp, June 12, 3:17 p.m., 2 days ago. The bookmark quivered in her hand. I closed the image and opened my email draft: "We need to talk. Urgent." My finger hovered above send. Too soon. There was more to learn. I reached into my coat pocket for my leather notebook, the one I used to track receipts and odd notifications. Flipping to the vacation section, I found her flight details: arrival at Louis Armstrong Airport on June 10, departure set for June 17. I jotted the photo's timestamp onto the page in neat script, then closed the notebook and slipped it back into my pocket. A bus rumbled past, rattling the cafe window. I looked up to see a stranger at the counter offering a sympathetic nod. I nodded back briskly and returned to my coffee, letting its bitterness ground me. Rising from the table, I straightened my tie and wiped my hands on a napkin, careful not to betray any tremor. The fluorescent light above felt harsh, but its clarity suited the moment. I tucked the bookmark into my notebook spine, its petals pressing into the leather like a promise. This was only the beginning. Stepping into the sultry New Orleans afternoon, I let the mingled scents of rain and streetcar varnish wash over me. No tears. No outburst. Only measured steps toward gathering every shard of proof she'd left behind, and turning betrayal into the foundation of my own calm, methodical response. I still remember the first time she pressed her lips to mine as the French Quarter lights flickered on below our hotel balcony, her laughter carried away by the river breeze. Back then, our life felt as seamless as the jazz notes drifting through the wrought iron railings. At home in Baton Rouge, we cultivated routines that felt unbreakable. Saturday mornings meant pancakes on the Formica table, her humming Georgia on my mind, while syrup pooled in every crevice of my waffle. I'd pause between bites just to watch her smile, the sunlight through the kitchen window catching her hair like spun gold. On Sundays, we tackled DIY projects together. I'd hand her the sander, and she'd smooth our bedroom walls with careful strokes while I measured and hammered in the new curtain rods. After, we'd collapse on the couch, her feet resting on my lap, both of us exhausted and exhilarated by the simple satisfaction of our handiwork. The brass bookmark she'd carried on our first trip glinted atop the mantel clock, a silent witness to our shared victories. But amid those memories lay the first tremors of doubt I swatted away. It started with the late-night calls. I'd wake to her FaceTime ringtone at odd hours, 1:14 a.m., 2:37 a.m., just long enough for me to catch a glimpse of her silhouette before she ended the call. When I asked, she'd murmur about group study sessions or comforting a friend in crisis. I took her at her word. Then came the receipts. I noticed an unfamiliar charge on our joint account: international data roaming, $12.50, June 11th. My heartbeat jolted. I'd never authorized data roaming. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off. You know, I needed to map our walking tour around Jackson Square. I nodded, even as the receipt nagged at me. One afternoon, I stopped by her friend Rachel's house, ostensibly to drop off her missed mail. I overheard laughter filtered through the screen door, and Rachel's voice, "You two were inseparable on that trip, weren't you?" I've never seen her so alive. A spark of alarm shot through me. Which trip? I left the mail on the porch and didn't mention the call. That evening, I retreated to my office, our spare bedroom repurposed as a study, and opened her phones back up on my laptop. I wasn't proud of the betrayal, but I needed clarity. Among dozens of study group threads, I found a hidden folder of photos labeled Nola Memories. Inside, images of her with that stranger, a close-up of clasped hands, 2 coffees on a tiny bistro table, the pressed flower bookmark laid between them like a bridge. I noted each timestamp, June 12, 4:05 p.m., June 13, 10:22 a.m., and cross-referenced them with my own flight tracker logs. She'd texted me every evening around 8 p.m., the photos in the hidden folder were taken well after, in the early afternoon. The evidence felt cold and precise, but it grounded me. Next, I pored over bank statements. Hotel du Monde, $312.50 on June 11. Café Beignet, $14.75 on June 12. Streetcar fare, $2.75 on June 13. I printed each page, highlighted the lines in pale yellow, and slipped them into a manila folder. I dated each slip, Evidence A, Evidence B, Evidence C. Still, I craved something more tangible. One night, I followed up on a delivery notification she'd forwarded, a local florist charging $56 on June 12. I called the shop and asked about order details, recipient address, Hotel du Monde, room 207. My throat tightened as I confirmed she wasn't staying with her mother at all. With every discovery, my grief mingled with determination. I revisited our wedding album, tracing the pages to that photograph of us dancing under a canopy of live oaks, her white dress billowing, my tie undone. I closed the album and placed the bookmark atop the mantel clock. It lay there like a challenge. Remember what this symbolized. I also enlisted quiet allies. My brother Alex, whom I trust above all, agreed to review my evidence with fresh eyes. Over beers on his back porch, I showed him the folder. He nodded, sober and steady. Everything points to her pretending to visit Mom, but actually living this other life. His affirmation felt like permission to proceed. At home, I set up a discreet notification on my email. Every time her phone synced, I'd get an alert. I configured my router to log connection timestamps. I purchased a simple voice recorder and hid it inside an empty pastry tin, ready to capture any future slip of her voice or background noise. And through it all, I maintained a calm exterior. I shared dinner with her parents on Father's Day, complimented her mom on the lemon pie, and asked after their garden. They believed her story, unaware of the parallel life she'd led. I smiled and nodded, all the while feeling the ledger of evidence grow heavier in my study. By the time that message arrived in the cafe, with the photograph that shattered my illusions, I had already amassed a trove of data, photos, receipts, logs, voice clips, and eyewitness fragments. Each item was a shard of truth. And though my head still swam with memories of laughter and shared dreams, beneath the tide of betrayal, a new resolve had taken root. I would not crumble. I would marshal every clue, every memory, every whispered lie, into the framework of my response, and walk forward with the quiet confidence of someone armed with undeniable proof. The morning after I sent that curt email, "We need to talk. Urgent." I woke with a clarity that surprised me. Over a black coffee in my study, I placed the pressed flower bookmark beside my laptop and opened a new document titled, Evidence and Next Steps. Its blank lines felt like a promise of progress. 1. Retaining legal counsel by 9 a.m., I sat in the waiting area of Harper and Stanton Family Law. My fingers drummed on the leather portfolio containing printed photos, hotel receipts, tram tickets, bank statement excerpts, and the torn scrap of my wife's flight itinerary. When attorney Rachel Stanton appeared, her gray-tipped hair in a precise bun, I offered a firm handshake and slid the portfolio across her mahogany desk. She reviewed each exhibit in silence, flipping first through the cafe photograph on the balcony, then the hidden photo folder screenshots, and finally the highlighted statements showing Hotel du Monde charges. Moments passed before she looked up. "This is thoroughly documented," she said. "If you're prepared to move forward, you and I will preserve this under privilege, draft a custody and support proposal, and file for temporary orders." Her calm authority anchored me. We signed an engagement letter stipulating her retainer and outlined our timeline. Evidence preservation, secure original files and devices. Drafting petitions, custody, visitation, and asset division motions. Temporary orders, requesting primary physical custody and a freeze on joint accounts. Discovery phase, subpoenas for phone records and hotel registries, if needed. I left her office that afternoon feeling lighter, as if the burden of indecision had lifted. 2. Confidence and support back home. I convened a video call with my brother, David. Over FaceTime, I spread the portfolio open on my desk and walked him through each piece of evidence. He leaned forward, brows knitting. "You've dotted every I and crossed every T," he said. "Now it's about strategy." He suggested we loop in my longtime friend Marcus, a private investigator by background, who could help obtain phone record metadata and verify the hotel's guest log. Later that evening, I met Marcus at his modest office above a laundromat. He examined my materials, then offered to run a records request for hotel stay confirmations and data roaming logs directly from the carriers. "I can't guarantee speed," he cautioned, "but I'll do my best to expedite." His professionalism bolstered my confidence. 3. Preserving the evidence. That weekend, I set up a secure folder on my encrypted external drive labeled, "All Evidence, Do Not Delete." I copied every image file, PDF, and bank statement scan into it, then verified the checksums to ensure no alteration. Next, I purchased a small safe and locked my leather notebook, printed receipts, and the original pressed flower bookmark inside. Each artifact now sat under literal lock and key, ready to be produced at a moment's notice. 4. Notarization and formal proposals. On Monday, I visited Sullivan Notary Services. The notary watched as I thumbed through the custody proposal drafted by Ms. Stanton. Legal custody, joint decision-making, with primary physical custody to me. Visitation, every other weekend and alternate holidays, with clear pickup times. Support, temporary child support based on state guidelines, and spousal support pending asset division. I signed each page in her presence. She stamped and sealed the documents. As the notary seal impressed the paper, I felt each clause transforming from ink into tangible safeguards for my child's future. 5. Technical measures. Next, I enlisted Marcus to help install discrete security cameras in our home. We chose 1080p models with timestamp overlays and wired them into the attic to prevent easy detection. One camera faced the front hallway, another covered the back porch door. He tested each feed on his tablet, nodding as the crisp, date-stamped images appeared. I also purchased a compact voice recorder and hid it in a decorative box on my wife's desk. Its microphone sat flush with the rim, poised to capture any conversations she might have about final settlement terms, should she try to downplay her actions. 6. Financial and asset division. Midweek, I met with our financial advisor, Simone Reynolds, at her downtown office. I laid out the spreadsheet Ms. Stanton had prepared, the marital home's equity, retirement accounts, savings, and personal property. Simone ran projections. Home equity split scenario, 60/40ths, reflecting my primary custody responsibilities. Retirement, each party retains their own 401k and IRA. Savings account, freeze pending final decree, automatic review in 90 days. Personal property, I retain workshop tools and the mantel clock, she retains jewelry and the travel keepsake bracelet. Simone's summary report, complete with tax implication analysis, went directly to my attorney. 7. Confidence in motion. By Friday, my study looked like a strategist's war room, walls plastered with timelines, color-coded charts of expenses, and the golden petals of the pressed flower bookmark pinned over the word truth. I rehearsed key statements aloud. On June 12 at 3:17 p.m., Ms. Allen was captured on camera with Mr. X. My voice grew steadier with each pass, the tremor of betrayal receding. That evening, I received a brief email from Ms. Stanton. Upcoming, hearing scheduled for July 2 at 10 a.m. Prepare final exhibit list by June 25. I exhaled, tasting relief. A concrete date meant momentum. I placed the bookmark back into its safe, then stood and walked slowly around my study, absorbing the fruits of my labor. No longer adrift in uncertainty, I felt anchored by preparation and unshakable resolve. By channeling my grief into measured action, consulting the right professionals, safeguarding every piece of evidence, and drafting clear proposals, I transformed betrayal into the bedrock of my systematic pursuit of justice. Each notarized document, each camera feed, Each spreadsheet entry brought me closer to resolution, and closer to reclaiming the life and integrity my wife had so carelessly abandoned. I stepped into Attorney Stanton's conference room just after 10, the late morning light filtering through blinds and slanting across the cherrywood table. On that table lay my wedding photograph, ours framed beneath a canopy of magnolia blossoms, its glossy surface catching the glare. Beside it sat the sealed binder of exhibits, arranged in chronological order. My wife entered with her lawyer, shoulders hunched, eyes wary. I closed the door and took my place at the head of the table, folding my hands over the binder's spine. "Thank you for coming," Stanton said, her tone neutral. She offered my wife a glass of water. My wife's fingers trembled as she accepted it. I let Stanton open the proceedings. "Mr. Allen has provided evidence suggesting misrepresentation," Stanton began. "We'll review exhibits A through D, then discuss a path forward." She tapped the photograph. Exhibit A, the Barcelona balcony image, timestamped June 12 at 3:17 p.m. "Mr. Allen, would you present?" I nodded and lifted the photo. This is the moment I first learned the truth. I placed the framed wedding portrait in front of my wife. "This," I said softly, "was our promise. And this," I lifted Exhibit A, "was your betrayal." My voice carried no anger, only the steady weight of fact. Stanton clicked her remote, the balcony photo filled the screen behind us. My wife's gaze drifted from the screen to the wedding portrait, and I watched the color drain from her face. Unflinching, I continued, "Exhibit B, hotel receipts and data roaming charges showing you in New Orleans, not with your mother." I slid the highlighted bank statement across the table. "Exhibit C, metadata from your travel journal confirms the pressed flower bookmark appears in every image with this man." I tapped the journal printout. "And Exhibit D, text logs proving you assured me of daily calls at 8 p.m., yet these photos were taken in the afternoon." My wife's lawyer cleared his throat. "We understand the evidence, Mr. Allen." He glanced at her. She raised a hand. Silence stretched, broken only by the clock's muted tick from the small digital display on Stanton's desk. I placed the wedding photograph closer to her. "This photograph was taken on our wedding day beneath that magnolia tree. Look at her smile, look at how much trust one placed in you." My voice remained controlled, each word deliberate. I deserve the truth more than empty words. Her lips quivered. "Michael, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I let the apology hang a moment, then said, "I'm not here for theatrics. We can settle this now, based on these facts, or proceed to motions and hearings." I gestured toward the binder. "The proposal inside reflects equitable custody, asset division, and support terms, all drafted from the evidence at hand. I'd prefer we avoid court if possible, for our child's sake." Her lawyer exhaled, flipping through the binder. "The terms are fair," he conceded. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. She picked up a pen from Stanton's tray and signed the first page of the settlement sheet. I signed immediately after, placing my pen down with a soft click. Stanton stamped the agreement, then gathered the exhibits. My wife folded her hands over the wedding photo, tracing the magnolia petals with trembling fingers. As we rose, I offered a polite nod, no embrace, no bitterness. Outside the conference room, the hallway's bright light felt surreal. In my hand, I held the signed agreement, and in my mind, I replayed every measured step that had led me here. The wedding photograph now lay on the table of Stanton's office, a silent witness to both promises made and broken. But I walked out with something stronger than betrayal, the quiet authority born of calm preparation and unassailable proof. A week later, the final decree arrived by certified mail. I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight slanting through the blinds, and read the judge's typed endorsement: joint legal custody, primary physical custody granted to me, biweekly visitation for her, spousal support set at a fair percentage of our combined income, and the marital home awarded to me with her share in liquid assets. I felt no triumphal fanfare, only a quiet relief, as if I'd exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That afternoon, I returned the sealed envelope to my study, which now resembled a command center, binders of exhibits, my brother's notes, printouts from our financial advisor. On the wall above my desk hung the framed wedding photo, magnolia blossoms arching overhead. I reached out and rotated the frame so our smiles faced me directly, reminding me that promises can transform, too, from naive vows into an impetus for strength. I spent the weekend rebuilding pieces of my life. In the garage, I picked up my old woodworking tools, planes, chisels, and sandpaper, and began shaping a cherrywood box to house the travel keepsake she once carried. Each shaving's curl felt like reclaiming a fragment of myself. I worked the grain until the surface gleamed, then polished it by hand, savoring the smooth glide of my palm. On Saturday evening, I invited friends over for a casual barbecue in the backyard. Laughter and the scent of charcoal filled the air as Tom and Marcus recounted old college stories. My daughter danced barefoot on the patio, her giggles a reminder of what truly mattered. When she toddled over to hug my leg, I swept her into my arms and kissed her forehead. In that moment, every procedural document faded behind the warm glow of newfound stability. That night, I launched my blog, Uncharted Paths, with a simple post. When the maps we trust lead us astray, we chart new courses with evidence, resolve, and hope. This is for anyone rebuilding from betrayal. I outlined practical guides, how to preserve digital proof, draft custody proposals, and lean on a trusted circle. I shared the story of the Magnolia wedding photo, now repurposed as a beacon of renewal rather than a relic of broken trust. On Sunday morning, I slipped on my running shoes and woke my daughter for our first post-decree jog. We set out along the river levee as the sky blushed with dawn. She skipped ahead, turning to beckon me, and I matched her pace, heart light with purpose. Every step felt steady, each breath a testament to the justice I'd forged through calm, methodical effort. Back home, I placed the cherrywood keepsake box on my desk, beside the wedding photograph and the pressed flower bookmark that had revealed the truth. Together, they formed a quiet tableau of what was lost, and what I had rebuilt. The morning light caught their edges, and I realized that my life, once fractured by betrayal, now gleamed with possibilities I had earned step by deliberate step.